Definitions. Dan Mitchell is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Let's discuss some of the joys of so-called democratic socialism and how well they're doing in places like Denmark and Sweden. Dan, I've so appreciated your thoughts on this as well. I was most fascinated with one of your recent pieces from January where you were discussing how, you know, in different parts of, well, in particular in Sweden, another man was forced to stitch up his own leg because he waited so long for medical treatment. I mean, that just sounds like that's where we want to be.
I guess the most important thing to understand is that Sweden, Denmark, places like that are about the best run welfare states you could ever possibly imagine. So if you're going to have a welfare state, by all means, be Sweden or Denmark, not Greece or Italy. That being said, their living standards are about 25% below American levels. So why would we want to copy that? Not to mention the problems that they have with their government-run healthcare systems and so on and so forth. But they're not good role models, except if you're comparing them to Greece.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I'm not quite sure. I guess that's what he's going for. I mean, of course, they complain about austerity in Greece, et cetera, et cetera. But as you said, it is. It's even though it's the best managed welfare state, it's still a welfare state, and assumedly that's what he wants.
That is what he wants, but here's the thing that he doesn't understand, I bet. If you look at what determines economic growth in a country, fiscal policy is obviously one part of it, but it's also regulatory policy, trade policy, monetary policy, property rights, things like that. And on all those other categories, places like Sweden and Denmark are actually more free market than the United States. The only reason we're ahead of them is because they're so bad on fiscal policy that it can't compensate for the good things that they do in the other areas. So would I like to copy Sweden's school choice system? Yes. Would I like to copy Sweden's privatized or partially privatized social security system? Yes. There are some things that I really like about Sweden and Denmark, but they tend to be not the high tax redistribution-oriented welfare state, and that's, of course, the part that good old Bernie likes.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to increase taxes. He also wants to make post offices banks now, and he's been on Twitter all afternoon explaining democratic socialism. He says, well, it means democracy. It means creating a government that represents all of us, not just the wealthiest people in America. Dan, I get the idea he doesn't understand what that means.
He doesn't understand what socialism means. If you're an economist, the one thing you learn, the technical definition of socialism, is government ownership of the means of production. That's what that kook Jeremy Corbyn in the United Kingdom openly says. He's a real socialist. The Cubans are real socialists. Bernie Sanders is not a real socialist. He's just Obama and Hillary taken to another level. Higher taxes and more redistribution, but that's not socialism. Yeah. That's redistributionism. It's bad, but you still will have the private sector owning the companies and making decisions. Now, of course, privately inside his head, he probably actually does want the government to set up steel companies and auto companies, but even he's not stupid enough to openly admit it.
Yeah, it amazes me that that his platform and him embracing socialism has really even gotten that far. And I kept thinking, Dan, during the debates, you know, we're watching, quasi-socialism here on stage being openly celebrated and posited as an authentic, legitimate political party here in the United States of America. I was flabbergasted.
It truly is a sign that the Democratic Party is about as hardcore left-wing as you can be without actually becoming technical socialists in the public finance definition of it. But here's the thing to understand in terms of the politics. If you look at Bernie Sanders' lifetime vote rating from the National Taxpayers Union, it's about equal to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton when they were in the Senate. So as far left as Bernie Sanders is, the only real difference between him and Obama is his rhetoric is more inflammatory. He's sort of open and proud about how left-wing he is. But in terms of actual policies, I think Obama and Hillary are just about as bad.
Wow. Dan Mitchell, senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Dan, always good to see you. Thanks so much.
You did.